Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and welcome to the new moon in Pisces II live stream today. I am joined by my good friend Shannon Aganza. How are you doing today, Shannon?
Amazing. I am newly in Sedona last night. I'm here for work, so feeling it.
Energy vortexes swirling all around, right?
Yeah, they're swirling. Not always easy.
Sure. So if you are joining us from digital land here, pop into the chat box and let us know where you're stopping in from. Always love to hear who's with us today and the parts of the world that you're coming from. But let's talk about you, Shannon. How did you come into this work, this astrological work, this consulting divination work that you do, and where are you from, and what are you all about?
Um, well, it's kind of fascinating. I was thinking about it this morning because I always say, oh, my mom studied astrology. So I really have been, at least like my consciousness has been very rooted since I was a kid because she did study academically. Of course, then it was modern astrology was about all there was to learn. But I was thinking about how really it was about being astrologically gaslit. Is that the way to say it? Because my
Yeah.
mom would tell me, you have an Aries moon and you da da, and I go to find out. It's like, wait a minute, I have a Pisces moon. So I was going in to win an argument. It's true. Like, no, I don't. And I would love to have an Aries moon, but I don't.
Sure.
I have a Pisces moon. But so that was the beginning of my training, we could say, was really in childhood, just absorbing all the information. And then when I was going to traditional Chinese medicine school, and I thought I was going to be an acupuncturist, and I was pregnant with my first child. And at the end of the program, I wasn't ready to leave my infant
Yeah.
to do the big, like 50 hours of work a week, and thought, I'll just practice astrology until she's older. And, come to find out I realized I'm doing the same thing. I'm still helping, and I just don't have to stock herbs and there's no
Yeah.
other cost. And so I've just been in this now full time, and it's really, I'm a consulting astrologer. I've been working full time for, I'm in my Saturn return with it. It's, right here at the 28-year mark here.
Wow.
I'm right in.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. And you're joining us from San Diego still?
yes,
Like
I
today you're in
am
Sedona. Yeah.
today I'm in Sedona,
Right.
but I live and practice in Carlsbad and Encinitas,
Nice.
so
Very
yeah,
cool.
Southern California.
Yeah, Shannon and I met at the United Astrology Conference in 2018, which was sort of my introduction to the bigger world of astrology. Like I'd been studying on my own for a period of time, but then I went there and I was like, my eyes was like, whoa, there's this whole community. And Shannon and I gravitated towards one another really quickly. And you kind of showed me the ropes and introduced me to people. And that was really, I'm just so grateful to have met you at that place and the time that we shared there as well.
And it was so wonderful too for your first time, because there's nothing like UAC of all the conferences, UAC is the main one. And just
Yeah.
that, like from an astrological perspective, you just cannot get enough. And yeah, the astro mom, I am an astro mom.
You were definitely my astro mom at
And
that
it's like,
conference.
let's feed you. I know this is, you need to eat, we need to
Sure.
ground. And that was what was it? It was one of the pre-conferences with Lisa Scheim and Chris Brennan
Right,
on
right,
how to start an astrology group, a
right.
local astrology group. And I went home and started one with my good friend, astrologer Shauna McGrath. And we just, from that meeting we went to. But that was.
Yeah, that was a real interesting introduction to all the people there too, because I'd been listening to Chris's podcast for quite some time before UAC, and then the first experience there was like, oh, there he is, right next to me. I was like, I was a little starstruck at that
My
time.
God.
So,
and then Rob Hand reading your chart, that was a moment for you, wasn't it?
It was.
It really
yeah.
felt, yes, you are an astrologer. Really,
it seems like such a long time ago now, but it's so interesting how quickly it goes by. And I think about what I was, where I was at that point, just with my studies, and I was such an astro baby. So I'm glad I had you to nurture the experience there. So thank you for that.
Oh gosh, and look at what you've done. I am so impressed with the work you are doing, Spencer, just bringing light, especially on that Decan level and the fixed stars, and making it accessible to people like me. I was saying before this that, I have my handful of fixed stars that are in my pocket all the time that I utilize, but I don't bring in the whole scope. And some of it is, I don't know, maybe laziness, but also practical, because I'm just,
sure,
doing it. And just what you're doing is making it so accessible. So I just.
Well, thank you. This is going to be our Leo rising love fest today. we, the Leo risings at the UAC conference could recognize each other. They're like, "Oh, you're great. No, you're great. No, you're great."
And that is that UAC, the one in Chicago. It was just a Leo rising. It just proved astrology, right? We were just.
Yep, totally, 100%.
Right.
All right, Shannon, I'm checking in on the chat box here. We've got some people joining us. Mariana is here. Happy to be listening. Welcome, Mariana. Coming from Argentina, welcome. Dimfy is dropping in from the Netherlands, one of our Netherlands friends. Tarja is here, stopping in from Finland. Welcome, Tarja. Raven is saying hello from the Sunflower State. All right, excellent, Raven. Holy Creation is here from Newport Beach, so another little beach town. Yeah, Kathy. And then Tarja is saying we're having our Leo moment. Yes, we definitely are. And then we have Majad Hala Saeed is here from Toronto by way of Palestine, or Toronto. I think it's Toronto, but if you want to clarify there, welcome. It's nice to have some new faces here today. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to be kind of going on a little bit of a deep dive of Pisces archetypes. We're going to uncover some things with the new moon that's happening on March the 2nd, conjoining Jupiter in the second decan of Pisces. We'll talk a little bit about this tarot card here today, the 9 of Cups. We'll tell a few stories, talk about our experiences, and at the end of the show, we will do an animal symbol for the new moon and break down an I-Ching hexagram. How's that sound, Shannon?
Beautiful.
Sounds good. All right. So also Christopher is stopping in from Colorado. So I love it when everyone's stopping in the chat here. If you have any questions today, Shannon and I would be more than happy to uncover some knowledge, I guess, hopefully for you. If you have anything that you want to share or contribute or questions to ask. If you would like to make a material donation to the work that we're doing here, there's a little $ in the chat that's called a super chat or a super sticker. And really, you're buying me the gift of time to do this research and to be able to dive into these books and take crazy Virgo-ish notes all the time. So appreciate all of your support there as well. Now, Shannon, before we move on, where can we find you and what kind of services do you offer?
Okay. It's so funny. I've procrastinated on putting myself out more publicly. So I do have a website now. It's moongathering.com. And You can book private consultations on there, but it's not up yet, but I am putting a course together that will start in spring, and which is right around the corner, mid-spring, and kind of learning a bit of how I use astrology, which is learning your basics really foundationally, but then having the ability to open up. And, sort of the way I look at it is every person that comes to me, I am humble to that person and I try to meet them there. And so it requires a little bit of release of self. And so there's a little bit of that, but you have to learn the, traditional basics first.
Yeah. Well, and I always appreciated
Yeah.
I always appreciated how you balanced the practical with the inspirational as well. I mean, you always have a real positive take on things, and you've got this effervescence about you that is the enthusiasm is contagious. So yeah, Shannon and I talk fairly regularly, and it's always a nice connection. And so I can highly recommend Shannon for if you need to feel inspired. If you need someone who validates you and your existence, and like you do really well at that. So I just wanted to point that out. That's I think one of your special gifts.
And it's always there. Like I'm harvesting it from you, from the person.
Mm-hmm.
It is everyone has light somewhere. And I have a challenging chart, so I've been through a lot of challenges and difficulties. So it's the way that I have found my way out.
I relate to that 100%.
Many challenges.
Yeah, 100%. So
you're talking there's always a way out.
You're talking to a 12th house sun here, so we've lived a few things. Yes. Okay, we've got Fionn is joining us, I think from Ireland, right, my friend? So welcome. And then Cookerzilla is here from Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia. All right, getting the Canadians in the house here. Okay, so before we dive into the chart, I just want a little bit more business here. Make sure that you visit Shannon, moongathering.net. Is that right?
.com,
moongathering.com. I also have some services that are coming up. I have my Decans of Pisces webinar that's going to be happening on the 12th of March. That's a Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm running a special right now until the 1st of March. You can get 20% off the price using the code Pisces20. So there's a link to that in the description of this video. You can also find that on my website, spencermichaud.com. I would love to see all of you there. We talk about kind of some of the themes here, but we really go into a deep dive with the mythology and the fixed stars, and it's kind of like sort of my magnum opus right now, like where I'm just dumping everything that I'm learning into these webinars, and we have a lot of really great conversations and community building within it as well. So hope to see you all there. One other thing that I've been really encouraging people to do lately is if you aren't signed up for this, I would love it if you could subscribe to the newsletter, the Spencer Michaud Astrology newsletter, with all the different algorithms going on with different social media channels and challenges. That's the greatest way to stay in touch with your friendly astrologer, your friendly neighborhood astrologer and diviners. It is the direct way that we can, help to keep you aligned with all the videos and webinars and articles, all the content that we're creating. So there's a link to that in the video as well. And one other thing you could do, if you want to help us with our algorithmic stuff, is hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave me a comment. There we go. Did I get it all, Shannon?
I think you got it.
It's so interesting, the hoops that we have to jump through these days in modern technology. Right?
Oh my gosh. And all we want to do is just divine the chart, right?
Yeah.
We gotta do all the business.
But you have to participate a little bit. When there is a system set up, you kind of have to figure out what the rules of that game are and what the system are if you want to, survive sometimes. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you all for bearing with all of those things. And yeah, let's dive into it. We've got a few more people joining us. Azur is here from France. Nice to see you. Azur? I think that's how I say it. I'm going to pull the chart up here and we will start diving in. Okay, so what we are looking at is March the 2nd, 2022. We have a 12-degree Pisces sun and moon. That's what a new moon is, when the two lights come together, like the light of spirit with the sun and the sort of the light of the reflected light of form and of the body with the moon. And it's going to be very close to a domicile Jupiter. Shannon, do you have any big picture thoughts about this new moon and what we might be expecting or experiencing?
Well, gosh, there's so much in it. It's looking at this chart, there's so much going on that it's hard to look at just the new moon by itself. And like my first feeling is hope and is you know, feeling as it's applying to this Jupiter, we have like a shred of hope. And when anything is in Pisces, it engages our vaster self, is the way that I look at it. And so it's that like sort of intangible, that we have something more within reach than we usually have with Pisces in general. So coming close to that Jupiter, you know, it's sort of that reset, right? That's what we're doing at new moon. It's informing where we're going and what we're doing. So it is that moment of no matter what is happening in the world, which actually we have a lot happening in the world right now,
We do.
is to refocus the self and re-engage our perceptions and how we're moving forward, and hopefully being able to put a lens of how do I say that? Even if it's just love, exuding support, all of those things are that unconditional, compassionate love, putting down swords so that you can just be connected on that human level. If we're just even doing that, that's like some of my first feelings around this.
Yeah.
So many, like I can't get my eyes off of the you know, the Venus, Mars, Pluto.
Yeah, that's kind of the big elephant in the room, isn't it? We've got here, I'll circle some of this stuff for everyone. So we have the new moon here conjoining Jupiter, and subsequently we'll be kind of, you know, hitting Neptune as well. And then we have the Mercury Saturn conjunction here at about 18 degrees of Aquarius. And then we got this funky Mars, Venus, Pluto conjunction happening roughly in about the 27th degree of Capricorn, in Capricorn 3. So as I record this, you know, the big news on everyone's mind is sort of the challenges that are happening in Eastern Europe right now. And I wanted to say to all my European friends out there that, you know, thoughts and prayers are with you, and hoping for peace. This is one of the things that I'm really hoping, or putting my own intention out there with this new moon in particular, is maybe bringing a sense of peace. In traditional astrology, you know, Jupiter or Zeus was actually an order bringer. He was a peacemaker. He was a bridge builder. So there is a possibility that this could be the beginning of that, I hope. But Mars Pluto that's a really difficult aspect, especially when we have a third decan of Capricorn that represents seats of power. That's the Four of Pentacles energy, with like bureaucratic systems and governments and things of that nature. So it's not a perfect new moon. That's for sure.
It's not a perfect new moon, but I also think it's important to remember that when we have these moments we can utilize this energy to set something in place, to that it isn't just a passing moment, that when, especially in this Pisces, sorry, I'm just going to go all Pisces this whole time, but the intention of what you said, the intention of, you know, encapsulating in love and peace. And I know it sounds, you know, Pollyanna in some ways, but you know, love goes across all, it doesn't matter, all dimensions. And when we do that in this moment, electionally, then that has, you know, more traction as time does go on. And that the more people that focus on that around this time, the more that it can sort of net it for moving forward.
Yeah, I like that. And I agree. And in this particular decan of Pisces, Pisces II, is related to the Nine of Cups. Austin Coppock calls this the net, like you were bringing in that word intuitively. And I have a quote here that I wanted to share with everyone, because I think it's really a great way to kind of understand what this middle decan energy is like. In my study of the tarot and the decans recently, Shannon, I'm starting to see that the middle decans hold the key to the balance point for those decans. You have extremes on either side. You have like the initial energy that may be growing, but also there's some disappointment in the first decan of Pisces. And then in the third decan, there's this like extreme sacrificial nature related to that Mars-ruled decan. But here in the middle, the Jupiter-ruled decan, I just gotta say, Jupiter is, this is a really Jupiter area of the zodiac. It's ruled by, you know, the nocturnal Jupiter. We're in the terms of Jupiter. The face ruler is Jupiter. It's like the most Jupiterian place in the zodiac. And to me, that really brings in the ability to create or co-create through the power of our imagination, through the power of our intention, the power of our wishes. And I don't say that about every place in the zodiac. I think that there are certain places where you have to accept the reality of your situation, and say, okay, well, this is what it is, and we have to come to terms with it. And there's a little bit of that here, like you know, not having trying to close the gap between reality and hope. But this is a magical place in the zodiac, isn't it?
It is. And just, you know, as you're saying that, and how much dignity we have in this particular realm, that really I look at it as almost a responsibility for the ones who are not in the super struggle crisis aspect of this time, to lend that, you know, that energy. And what, you know, because there's different ways. Some people will pray, you can just meditate, visualize, however it is, it you know, that's what I look at a lot of the times in our whole, you know, looking at all the astrology of now.
Well, and I love that, because there's literature in this deck and it talks about the interconnectedness of consciousness, right? And even though we're not in that moment, maybe some of us are in not in the war zone itself, we can lend our energy through, I don't know, astral travel on some level, right?
Yes, and even just through intention, whether you think you're doing something or not, it adds. And that's the thing. I feel like a lot of what's going on globally is we are becoming more aware of each other. That whole like anima mundi, and not in our subconscious, but in our conscious. And that means we have to hold responsibility for what we have, that we have in excess or that we have good.
Right. I wanted to read this quote.
Interconnectedness.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry. You cut out for a second.
No, no,
Still,
that's yeah, go ahead.
okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. Um, I wanted to read this quote on Indra's net that will, I think, confirm what you're speaking towards with this. So Indra's net, uh, this, and I'm quoting, is an infinitely large net of cords owned by the Vedic deva Indra, which hangs over his palace on Mount Meru, the axis mundi of Buddhist and Hindu cosmology. In this metaphor, Indra's net has a multifaceted jewel at each vertex, and each jewel is reflected in all of the other jewels.
Mhm.
The image of Indra's net is used to describe the interconnectedness of the universe. And there is a quote here from Francis H. Cook describing this net, and it says, "Far away in the heavenly abode of the great god Indra, there is a wonderful net which has been hung by some cunning artificer in such a manner that it stretches out infinitely in all directions. In accordance with the extravagant tastes of deities, the artificer has hung a single glittering jewel in each eye of the net, and since the net itself is infinite in dimension, the jewels are infinite in number. There hang the jewels glittering like stars in the first magnitude, a wonderful sight to behold. If we now arbitrarily select one of these jewels for inspection and look closely at it, we will discover that it is polished, that its polished surface, in its polished surface, there are reflected all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel is also reflecting all the other jewels, so that there is an infinite reflecting process occurring." Right?
Oh,
So we're reflecting, we're all kind of reflections of one another in this interconnectedness. Um,
yes. If I was going to do this with you, this was the one I was supposed to do with you.
totally. Well, it's conscious. I bring guests on that have these placements, so like,
This wasn't a mystical coincidence.
sure.
But like that is maybe at the core of my practice is
Mhm.
that, and not that we all understand that out the gate, but it's that gentle opening of the eyes and being able to see. And when we have that part of even a little bit of awareness, there can be a relief in it, and we all have our times of suffering, we all have our times of not suffering, but that we share it all. It is shared.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had a conversation with another podcaster named Laura Chung, and we were talking about the, collective suffering as well as when, when one group is being oppressed, that it is, we're feeling it as a collective as well. Like there is an interconnectedness where, and that we're seeing this in this world stage right now too, is that the events in maybe a place that isn't our immediate backyard will have an effect on our day-to-day life as well, and even more so for our European friends, and like the stabilization of that area of the world as well. So yeah, I think that this Decan always reminds me of Neo in the Matrix. Like the
Yes.
story of Pisces is really, I think, his story on some level of like, being dissatisfied with his reality in the first decan, going off in search of meaning, disconnecting from an old narrative potentially, learning kung fu, learning how to manipulate with and co-create with the energies that he's surrounded with. And then eventually he becomes sort of, quote unquote, the one who is making a sacrifice to liberate others as well.
Yes.
It's
And
just,
the removal of all the mind beliefs or concepts, like when he's learning all the different fighting techniques,
yeah,
he had to undo his mind, which
right,
is
right.
very Pisces.
Yeah,
And
it's it
flow, that
flow state.
middle place of flow of having access to both, because that really is what we're hopefully all working towards, right?
Absolutely.
Not to escape this place, which is the other big danger here. It's really, there's a lot of that in this new moon, to just, la 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 la,
That's
And
a great point. And that is a danger, definitely, with Pisces energy, since it is so yin, right? It is so internally focused. We might want to just go off into our own worlds, our own imaginations, and try to tune out the difficulties that are going on and the suffering that's going on, which on some level, I think it is important to be able to center ourselves so that we're not adding to the negativity, right? So we can bring a place of centeredness and calm and peace. But I do think that when we go into like the meditative states, I do think it is important to balance that with being present, being in our bodies and physical as well,
yes.
and paying attention when those of us who don't have the luxury of meditation in times of trauma, to hold space for them, right?
Right, exactly. And just what I know you probably don't want to go down this road, but one statement about the US Pluto return, I've been looking at this and talking about it for probably since about 2017, because we could see it building up of, as far as in the US, we're a little, I don't know, we're a Cancer. We like our borders.
Yeah.
We like our internal, and not like, we are not known for learning other languages. We're pretty insulated. And that Pluto return, I try to explain it like, the age of a nation. It's kind of like what we think of as a Saturn return for a human, for
Yeah.
our lifespan. And just kind of the thing I've always looked at a Saturn return. What I was taught was, you're not really an adult until you have a Saturn return, because you know how we have then experienced every conjunction, every aspect that Saturn can offer us. So we're not really, that's when we're an, air quote, adult. And so we're having this as a nation, like we're coming out of, just kind of adolescence,
Yeah.
and having, like, we need to be aware, we need to grow up, we're adulting as a nation.
Yeah. It's a
And
reckoning, isn't it? It's a
it's
reckoning.
reckoning.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of discomfort, but it's good. Like, we need this, where we need to have awareness. And so, yeah, I just, again, bringing that into this Decan,
Well, it's interesting you
danger
bring
of
that up.
escape. Like, we can't escape. we,
Yeah.
we have other things coming up that won't, it'll be a harder slam. I think we kind of talked about this before, I think, where, if you go too extreme escape, you come back and the world has been moving still, and there's more to clean up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way as a young person when I would desire to check out and not pay attention to my physical reality. Then you get snapped back into it with a severity, you know.
The severity,
Yeah.
exactly.
So balance is the key. I was gonna say, like, thinking about what you were talking about with the Pluto return with America and things of that nature. Um, have you seen the documentary that's been kind of going around and making the rounds in our community, the changing of the gods? Have you
Well, I
seen?
haven't had time. I am just salivating for it. Did you watch it?
Yeah, I've been kind of keeping up with it. It's been doled out in like daily doses over the course of the last couple days. They're gonna have
Okay.
like a marathon coming up on one of these weekends too, if people have missed out. But these episodes are still up there, I think. But they're talking a lot about Richard Tarnas's book Cosmos and Psyche and the Uranus-Pluto relationship. And I have some thoughts about that, but it's just interesting to me to see that, to be going through that very macrocosmic documentary as we're probably experiencing another one of those macrocosm historic moments, and being able to contextualize it through his work is really, it's been very fascinating.
That's something else, doesn't, I don't know if this is just me, but doesn't it feel like time is more in time, where we're not, like, transits happen immediately, where it used to be we would have a transit, but you might see it delayed before
Yeah.
you, even on a personal level, even where it's, something becomes exact and we're in it. It's, and so I think that that's part of it too, that it's not a mistake. We have the changing of the gods occurring at the same time as this.
Yeah.
Again, we can't escape. We're being offered multiple tools to look and be present in the world with what is happening and be a participant on whatever level. There's always a level to be a participant.
Well, one of the things that they were pointing out in last night's episode was the creation of plutocracies and, bringing in the Pluto element with a consolidation of wealth and all of the problems that can entail. And I think that, in the Ukrainian and Russian conflict, there definitely that element is present, and in the way that, there's a consolidation of wealth that's even more extreme in Russia than in America. But it's happening here, and we might have to deal with the fallout of that type of behavior from, the top 1%. And how do we restore balance to the way that we deal with our resources as a country, and it's going to take us all the way back through all of the challenging things that have happened to get to this point,
Exactly.
It's so much to process.
It is so much. And, just the recent nodal axis shift. We are looking at those topics. Those are the topics.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the chat here. Going back a few here. Age of Joy is joining us. Hello, star friends, is what they say. Hello to you. Raven is asking, is Jupiter in the Chariot right now? Yes, Raven. A planet being in its Chariot is when it is in its own domicile or its own home sign. Some authors would say also in its exaltation and in its own bounds. And that basically means that the planet is protected from being under the beams of the sun. Like in ancient Rome or Greece, they literally had these chariots they would go around in, and they had these little awnings that would protect them from the heat of the sun. So, a lot of the peacemaking that Jupiter has the potential for may still be going on behind the scenes because it's not visible, but it's still powerful, right? It's not getting burned up by the sun, which is, I think, a very good thing in this case.
And even more to harness that energy on whatever work we're doing on an individual level, whether it's that service for other and energy we extend out, or working with what we have in our own life, whatever, within.
Absolutely.
We all have our stress relative to ourself. And so that's a really good point to make. That's what I mean. We're in some time, this window of time where we can get a lot of stakes in the ground energetically.
Yeah, good seed planting.
Planting, exactly.
Yeah. We've got a few other people stopping in. Cobabs is here saying, hi, Shannon. Hi, Spencer. Well, hello, Cobabs. Dominique is here.
Oh,
Dominique. Astroino, is that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Lawrence, my friend Lawrence Sanchez is here. He's a great astrologer who I've been kind of in a group that has been doing some study with, and really knowledgeable, really thoughtful person as well. Thank you for stopping by, Lawrence. Let's see. Dimphy is asking, perhaps silly, but could one be tired because Pluto, Venus, and Mars are transiting conjunct to Saturn and Jupiter in the birth chart? Or am I mixing everything up and still being in the learning phase? No, I think if you have all of that stuff hanging out with your Saturn and your Jupiter, that could probably be a lot on your nervous system.
That is a transit that would turn a skeptic, I think, too. Okay, maybe there's something to astrology.
It's a lot.
There's no escaping that. But wow, think of the potency. And the way I look at that too, especially with the Saturn, that's one of those just let go. Like there's no, it requires stillness, I think. And, even though you want, especially with the Mars there, it still requires just let go. and
Well, and I'll tell you what, you and I have both been kind of talking about our various health challenges we've been going through lately. and like, and it's really, a thought is coming up to me about Mars and Venus and Pluto and Capricorn, especially it being a Saturn ruled sign. And it's a physical, like calcifying energy where it's like this, there's some blockage that, we may be experiencing. And when all of that hits Pluto, I think of Pluto as like I keep saying the divine plumber that's like getting rid, and it's like a colon cleanse.
I use the colonic metaphor.
Yeah. Well, not to get too crazy, but I've been having some pain in my like kidney area. And I finally went to the doctor yesterday because I was like, do I have a kidney stone? What's going on? And they're like, no, you're just a little bit backed up and constipated. I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad it's not something more serious, but it's still very painful. And I think that that's a thing where, we may be feeling backed up in our life. And like we're trying to, I think collectively, we're trying to move on to some kind of new experience and future, but we're getting stuck in these old patterns and old ways of doing things. And maybe this things that we're going through now, maybe helping to shake that old stagnant energy free.
And it's saying, no, you're not ready to move forward. There are a few things you haven't gotten yet. And that's, especially with, there's confinement involved where it's like, no, we haven't learned this yet. I think too, at least in this culture, it seems like we're so go, 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 move, move, move. And we haven't allowed ourselves the time to sit and be receptive to what's going on. Maybe not form an opinion quite yet, just be receptive and gather and listen and then form. And I think that we're in that phase, and that's a bit of why, we're
totally.
And the one who has this all happening on Saturn,
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot. And it can feel maybe punishing, but it just, the soul has a plan always. And I look at it even like to reframe it would be consolidating and sitting and just like something's being filled up.
Well, we've got a bunch of people in the comments here that are talking about dreaming of clogged sinks. Token 54321 is saying that last night they literally were dreaming of clogged sinks. Dimp is saying like is mocking me, but is saying that they'll take their dog for extra walks. Dimpy, definitely do that, because I think part of the reason that my system is sort of doing what it's doing is I've been a lot less active as it's gotten down to like the teens here in Michigan, where you try to, for me to go for my normal 3 to 4 mile walk that I usually take every day, it takes me 40 minutes to get all my clothes and my boots on. Like then you get outside, you're like, oh, it's 10 degrees out. And there's just some days where you're just like, fuck that. I don't want to do that today.
That is something that, some people say, oh, Shannon, you have good karma where you live. I go, no, I think it's that I'm a really fragile soul, that it's like, she wouldn't last a day in Michigan. And
right.
to do that.
You have to be hardy to live here, for sure.
Be hardy. I think it's the opposite. I think that is a consideration for a lot of the world, but totally. We have to have motion. Something, well, in this Pisces time too, one of the things that I was able to bring with me from my Chinese medicine training was Qigong. And just, on a practical level, something like Qigong is a practice you can do for yourself and have movement within just even there's sitting Qigong, but it gets your circuits going so you don't get all clogged up.
Yeah, and that's, I think Pisces season is great for that too, because Pisces is that time of year, especially in the northern hemisphere around where I live, where the frozenness, the stuckness of winter starts to melt and everything gets into this primordial soup of mud and everything's blending together. The boundaries are being
Oh my God.
dissolved between people, you know?
Yeah, the liminal space
Right,
too. And
exactly.
just, oh, right. And just right before, and it's so solitary too, right? Like we're
Absolutely.
not as extending out. Um,
All
yeah.
right. So I'm looking at the chat. Azure and Lawrence are saying that the changing of the gods are generally up for about a day at a time or 24 hours at a time, and there's a marathon next weekend. Okay, so that's good to clear that up. Yeah, I'm taking a look through here. Dimfy is also excited about changing of the gods with the history from the Greek and Latin classes. That's cool. Cobabs is saying, Shannon, you know me as Colette from our Greece trip. So you're like,
Okay.
so,
Colette, hello. So this Greece trip, speaking of liminal spaces,
ooh,
so we were so blessed to go with our teacher, Demetra George.
right.
She took us on an astrological spiritual pilgrimage. Can you imagine going to these sacred sites with Demetra? And like, it was just alive. The myth was alive. And Colette was one of the recipients. It's a long story, but that we'll just say each myth we were studying became alive and we were living through it on this trip. But it permanently, I think, shifted everyone on that trip.
I love Demetra, and I'm so very jealous of your trip, your Greece trip, because it sounds like an amazing experience. And being able to just see these places that we read about in the myth, and I'm sure that there's just an energy there that is palpable, you know.
See and feel. And we went to sites, we did the typical ones, more close to Athens, but we went up into northern Greece and Macedonia and Samothraki, the island where the winged victory.
Nice.
This is where Colette had a starring role on that part, which I won't share.
Excellent.
It was goats were involved. It was just a crazy experience, but we got to go to places where the energy, it wasn't trampled because there are few people in these sites. So yeah, that was a trip of a lifetime, and it informed my practice. It deepened my practice. And
And
she
Demetra
really
is a
is.
treasure, isn't she?
I was
Yeah.
going to say, I consider her the matriarch of astrology, and just speaking in that like oracular aspect
Yeah.
of, but so rooted, academically. It just, yeah.
Yeah, so keep your eyes peeled for when all this stuff clears up, whatever the world is going through. If there's another trip, if you can make it if you could save up for a trip with Demetra George, and I don't know how long she's going to be doing these trips. She's getting up there in her, her late 70s here, but
I have heard she might have one more trip in her.
okay.
So it is you take a loan out.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. All right. So I'm seeing here Colette saying, when Pluto was conjunct my sun, I had E. coli and filled the sewers. Yeah, like so I will say that the Venus Mars conjunction in Capricorn was opposite my sun and Mercury. So it's not surprising to me that like something like that was like, plugging up the sewer system of my body. But yeah, I do really think that Pluto is a planet that it's gonna dislodge a lot of those things, whether it's painful or not, like right. And maybe we're going through that metaphorically as a community, where we're backed up as a world right now. We're backed up with old power structures, with old, a consolidation of wealth can also
Yes.
be a blockage for peace and for fairness and for equality. And maybe we're plunging things right now. I don't know. I guess I always, even though studying astrology and especially this changing of the gods type of documentary, if you are any type of student of history, you will see that there empires rise, empires fall, communities and leaders rise and fall. But when you're really in it, the main thing that I think that I try to think about is, can this be done can the change be processed as peacefully as possible? Can people accept the change rather than fight it? Because when people fight change, that's when we go to war. That's when we suffer. It's like trying to swim upstream or something like that, right?
Right.
All
And
right, go ahead.
I was going to say too, I was thinking about that with Richard Tarnas, if anybody watched his episode on Pluto. And one of the things I grabbed from that is that he was talking about, like with wherever Pluto is, you have birth, and which means you have a goddess present, you have a mother energy, because it is, like a mother who gives birth knows you move through these titanic energies that take over her in order to bring the infant into the world, was how he was explaining it. And it's so like on that
Birth
macro
pains,
level,
yeah.
it just, if you pass the gate of Pluto, like just you can't bypass. And to me, like on the money level and the coming up to it, like you can't buy yourself out of it. I think that's
Right.
going to be something we see as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
It's frightening.
Well, Raven is saying that yoga has been replacing the morning walk with the single digit temperatures. So maybe staying flexible, right, in these times is important, and getting your body moving like that. Colette is saying that Qigong has saved their life, which is breathing is another practical thing we can do in these challenging times. Let me see what else we've got going on here. We have Darren is here from England. Welcome, Darren. Okay, I think we can kind of move on here a little bit. How you doing, Shannon?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So the other aspect that we didn't really break down here, though, is we do have a Mercury-Saturn conjunction happening at this new moon. We've talked a little bit about Pluto and Mars and Venus, and maybe the violence that could erupt with that, but also the healing potential and the birth potential that could come from that as well, through that disruption potentially. Now, when we have Mercury Saturn in the second decan of Aquarius, this is the decan with the Six of Swords, where people are being ferried across that, like the river Styx or some kind of river, from one shore to another, where we're moving on from a liminal space and kind of leaving the known and communicating between the periphery and the center. What have you seen, Shannon, with Mercury Saturn aspects? What kind of things come up for you with that aspect?
When I look at Mercury Saturn, it's like blocking like communication, like feeling held back in speaking.
Yeah.
And then the Six of Swords, and having this in Aquarius, I might turn this specifically with this more to trying to turn, even like Mercury, I think of as very frontal lobe thinking, and turning that processor brain, Saturn, looking to Saturn, not even fully as a blocker, but a teacher of, wait, stop, refine yourself. You need to come up and expand how we're looking at this before you speak,
Right. Yeah, sober communications, sober thinking, having a reality check. So I guess we've got a very dreamy, stack up in Pisces here. But we do have these other energies in these Saturnian signs. Pretty much everything else is in Saturn's domiciles, where we are going to have to. I think it's a 1 foot in the sky, 1 foot on the ground type of thing, where we're probably coming to terms with what is or isn't possible. I want to throw this to you, Shannon, too. That in my Aquarius research, the difference between Capricorn Saturn and Aquarius Saturn type was that Saturn and in Capricorn creates physical boundaries, whereas the Aquarian archetype is more about mental limitations, like the glass ceiling type of thing.
Yes, yeah, it is a fascinating study, especially for those who have transitioned, say, from a modern astrology rulership into a traditional astrology rulership, where it really is that, yeah, it's still putting up like the architecture. I think of architecture with Saturn in Aquarius, of that this is what we're mapping out that's expanded outside of what we've already had. But then it still wants to put in, still wants to dig footings in the building. It just wants the building bigger. And then we have to have that means our thinking has to be involved, or a vision.
I mean, I think that is the placement of rationality here in this new moon, right? Because we may have, with this new moon in Pisces, we may get very emotional and go to emotional extremes potentially, but there is at least a couple planets here that are maybe bringing us an ability to think with more, I guess, left brain it would be, more of that rational thinking. Tarya is saying Mercury with Saturn could also be rebellious talk as well. Yeah, I could see that. Yes. Revolution and rebellion.
Well, Aquarius is very uncomfortable giving personal freedoms away to plutocratic societies and systems.
100%.
So I do look at that. It's like new thought emerging to break free from like that status quo cap, but it wants to dismantle those systems of authority, I think.
Yeah, there's this kind of energy of going off into almost intentional exile with that sign. Yes. Where they're saying it's a decentralizing influence, where it says, oh, I don't want to be part of the established energy center here.
I like that. Intentional exile. We're seeing that, aren't we? That's
100%.
I think there's something okay as far as the path, because nothing is just, we have this problem, and then it's solved. We have to walk through things. We have to inform ourselves. We have to move into wisdom, and that's part of it. I think voluntary exile is, where you find that. There's a reason why there's temples on the planet,
Well, that Decan too is Mercury ruled Decan. So they, Austin Coppock talks about that Decan being communication between the center or the people in power and the people in exile. So maybe this is the beginning of a negotiation as well. Maybe a peace negotiation potentially is what I would hope. I'm going to throw that out there into the universe and put energy into that potentially.
That's what I was just going to say. This is how we shape our intentions, is exactly that. Not pulling from just wherever, but using the tools that we have at hand, the potentials of what is being offered with this as an electional chart, if we're looking at it from an electional perspective. And that's it. That's
a great lead into the next part of this, when we talk about some of the myths and stories that surround not only Pisces II, but a fixed star that's pretty close to this new moon called a Chariot at 15 degrees of Pisces. Much of the stories with Pisces II center around two themes, I think. One is, if we look at the tarot card, it's really about wish fulfillment and intention, but also wishes versus expectations, right? And seeing what kind of things are possible versus what we would like them to be. And then also the Sorcerer's Apprentice energy, where we have two stories in particular, one of Phaethon, who was the youth that was driving the chariot of the sun, but lost control. He begged his father to drive the chariot of the sun to prove that he was the son of a god, but lost control of this chariot and ended up getting shot down by Zeus and drowning in the river. And sort of this energy of not flying too high type of thing. And then Dolus, which is a story that comes up in Austin Coppock's book, where he talks about the assistant to Prometheus, who was trying to mimic his master Prometheus in creating humanity out of clay, but actually ran out of clay as he got to the feet. And but Prometheus was like, he was flattered by this and fired both of them in the kiln. And one became aletheia, which was truth, and the other pseudologos, which was falsehood. So I'm seeing here, this is a time for intentions. It is a time to make wishes and dreams, but I think it's important to release the how of how we're going to get there. We can block a lot of manifestation through our thoughts, through overly micromanaging things. I'm really guilty of this myself with all my Virgo stuff, as I will micromanage a dream to death. I think
Virgo curse, right?
Yeah, and you and I were talking a little bit before our show here about some of the Pisces energy is allowing yourself to rest and to surrender, but Pisces will bring you circumstances that are like, well, you've got to rest, you have to surrender, there's no choice. Like, and for me this week, it was my feeling in a lot of discomfort and a lot of pain physically. I just couldn't do all the things that I would normally do during the course of my week for some of the, preparation. I still managed to get some preparation in because I'm crazy, but
I'm impressed.
I was at the doctor all day yesterday getting tests and x-rays and ultrasounds and, and
well, it's like it comes in through the mental, trying to say, hey, slow down. And then
right.
Our physical body is the last place. Like if it hits our physical body, it's like we were not paying attention to.
And it felt like that. It felt like my body was like, nope, you're done for a little while. You need to take a time out. This is enough. So what I will say about that is it's easier if when we first hear the impulse to take the rest, if we listen to it rather than keep grinding away and trying to plant our fields in a time of hibernation. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. Yes. That's beautiful.
This is what our problem is in America, I think, right now, is that we feel like we have to plant a field all the time, exponential growth.
Exactly. And that was what I was trying to say earlier too, of just, we're on the yang side, like we don't yin.
Right.
You can't do that. Nature will always win. So nature will always balance it out. It's just, are you flowing with it, or are you at the hand of it, And 100%. We, as a culture, I think that's one of our maturation points is, and the yin in self-care, it doesn't mean do nothing. It isn't static. There's still energy current flowing. It's just in a different way. And absolutely. I think you just looking at the chart, that we have up here, and a bit of that when you were talking about, like intentions or manifestations, or, that, and not micromanaging it, that, looking at that Venus Mars, they have to go through the gate of Pluto, which Pluto requires you have to strip down to nothing. Like you only cross naked.
Like a Reshkagal and Inanna, right?
Exactly. You
yes.
completely telepathically it read my mind. That was exactly the image I had.
Yeah.
And that is that's helpful at this time, so we can utilize this energy to be our teacher as well and know, okay, this is uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to flow with it. There's a tremendous amount of energy to support us doing that during this time.
Yeah.
Um,
Dimfy's saying, and the grass won't grow harder when you pull it, is a saying over in the Netherlands. I like that. That's true.
I love that.
Yeah, you just pull it out. Exactly.
I love that. Oh,
and you know, this is another thing. When we're planting seeds, you know, it doesn't mean that it just manifests right away either. So sometimes when you are gardening and you're in one phase of it, you have to be okay being in that specific phase of growth. And you do what is necessary to maintain it. That's the part of being there, present physically. But then you let nature do its thing. And that's Pisces too, you know.
That is Pisces too. And just there is that germination process where it's underground and the seed doesn't know what's up or down. It's just in the void. And that's a necessary part and I will say again, you know, I have a really challenged chart. I have strong Pluto. I was born with the Uranus Pluto opposite Saturn.
Oh, wow.
And poor little Venus just wandered into the wrong room. She's in Virgo, sitting there with Pluto and Uranus. And so I've learned how to, I won't even say learned, I've just, you know, out of exhaustion, you know, just submitted. And so
out of necessity, really.
Out of necessity, but within it is that light that it's that part where if you let go and let it take its course, let nature reveal itself to you after you've cleaned yourself as much as you can, set your intention, you let it reveal itself to you. And then it's not as uncomfortable. It's not.
Yeah, I think there's different ways to respond to trauma. You know, I think that we can that's where we get to make the choice. We don't always get to choose the action that is happening to us, right? Or the experience or the fate that we may, you know, face. But we do get to sort of choose how we're going to react to it and how we're maybe going to grow from it. Sometimes things are just shitty and really terrible. And that's, you know, it's important to acknowledge that. But at the same time, you can choose to let it overwhelm you and maybe turn you towards a darker, bitter, jaded experience, or you can utilize that knowledge to be empathetic to people that may be going through something similar and maybe even trying to alleviate that pain for others through bringing clarity and awareness to that type of experience.
That's my life in a nutshell. That really was a moment for me of realizing all of these very challenging health situations I've had. At the end of the day, it was a gift for me. Number one, to have compassion for other people's suffering, but just even gaining what I learned is an offering. It becomes an offering. So some of our greatest suffering can actually be some of our greatest light.
I agree.
I really agree with you on, you know, it's how we respond to what is given to us, and just that concept of, you know, astrological fate and free will, because it just, you can't argue with it. This, you know, time is time. We're getting a look at time and how things are brought, what is brought into our lap. But I have found, again, because I've done this for so long on an intimate, you know, counseling level with the same people for 20, I have clients I've been reading for the full 28 years, and just having those repetitive, challenging transits where they start responding differently. And then when it comes around the next time, it only shows up to the level that is necessary. Right. To the point of then it's not even, you know, sometimes it even comes in the strength. Maybe it is, you're the teacher and leader of, let me help the world with this pain and struggle and suffering.
Well, and sometimes great pain can beget beauty too. I'm thinking of Frida Kahlo right now with her really traumatic accident and challenging life, but the beautiful art that came out of that also, you know.
And I, don't know that we as a collective humanity have learned how to grow and expand without a catalyst of stress,
Right, right. Yeah.
And why else are we here but to grow?
Well, and that may be something that brings us peace too with the world events that we're going through, that maybe through this stress that we're going through, this really dark time, maybe there will be something that is birthed in a, that is something beautiful that may come out of it eventually, I hope. And that actually is another transition point in our story here, because there is a Sephira, and a Kabbalistic, a Hermetic Kabbalistic sort of energy center associated with the nines in the tarot. And in this case, the Nine of Cups is related to Yesod, which is in the Tree of Life. It's like the birth channel where all the spiritual energies are sort of funneling into right before manifestation in the physical world. So think about all the alchemy that goes on before that you're just about to make something real, right?
Yes.
That's something that I've been meditating on. Is this new moon is a birth channel. It is very much a birth channel new moon on some level.
That's so beautiful. And I have to say too, this is probably not the platform to speak of it, but everything you just said, I do use quintiles. I will look at quintiles, and everything you just explained, Spencer, is how I explain quintiles. It's that palpable energy right before something is manifested. It isn't abstract, it's right before it goes through the door, and we do have, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we do have quintiles present in this new moon chart. But
you can also think of that similar energy just with Pisces in general related to the spring equinox, right? It's like
yes.
it's like we're pregnant with possibility before this renewal type of energy, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
In the Western Hemisphere, we
yeah.
are, or yeah, in the Northern Hemisphere, not Western, Northern Hemisphere, it is. And pregnant. It's
So Rachel is responding to your comments. Says, very true, Shannon. I dislike phrases which include overcoming or battling trauma. It's more working repeatedly with something, no matter how difficult, which leads eventually to no easy renewal. Yeah, I think that's true, right?
oh, beautiful. Yes.
And Colette's saying that difficult transits bring out our inner light, and maybe that's this is the analogy of the anvil as well. Yeah, I could see that, like we're forging something potentially. That's a very Mars Pluto type of energy, I think, too. Pounding something into form on some level. Hopefully, it's like I said, it's hard to talk about these things because a lot of the themes that we're seeing are, especially in the news right now, is just, it's oppressive. It's really difficult. It's I'm struggling with it because you don't want to be like, oh well, there's always going to be something good that comes out of it, because right now we're in a time period where many people are really suffering, and that is something that I'm struggling with as a sensitive person with the world energy right now. And so I just wanted to say for all my European friends and everyone out there that's feeling this sensitivity, is that it's okay to acknowledge that it's a difficult time.
And that's it right there, Spencer. We can acknowledge that this is here and it's real,
Yeah.
and that's the only place you can move from, and just the hope that is that this resolves quicker.
Yeah.
And again, the responsibility, at least for myself, that I give myself, is just doing what I can to encapsulate within my system and how I work, the protection, least loss of life, and just awareness. And that South Node in Scorpio, it's just at the beginning of its trek. I think
Totally.
we're at the beginning of, I think, some big, difficult things to swallow, struggles, but it's the purging, it's the it's the colonic that needs to happen, you know.
Yeah, yes, literally in my case, but yes, as as a community also.
As a community.
So if anybody's got some suggestions in the chat of a gentle, detox purging thing, I'm open to it. But yes, metaphorically, as above, so below, as within, so without, micro and macrocosm. Like I find it flattering that I'm so connected to universal energies. Oh, we're getting silly.
Oh,
It is a meditation in and of itself, though, when you are going through a physical manifestation of maybe the greater energy as well. I think it really does help you reflect on those things. I, I, I wish that it was less painful, but I think that sometimes life is painful. I think, and I think that what I'll say is this too shall pass, physically and metaphorically, right? And
well, that is the promise that we have astrologically, is this will move, these things move. And if we do the work that we're being asked to do, hopefully it will move into a better place.
Right. The world needs some Metamucil right now to pass things along.
Right. And that, we have our locations of suffering, and then, that don't think we're separate from that. We may have our own suffering that we need to do. And that's why it's good to be compassionate.
Absolutely. So Shannon, how about we touch briefly here on the first quarter square? I think we've gotten a pretty good breakdown of the new moon here. Yes. So this is March 10th, 2022. I always like doing kind of the quarters of the lunation cycle as well, because yes, we can look at one chart for the new moon, but it's a living chart. It's going to manifest and go through different stages and eventually come to fruition at the full moon. And here we've got the sun squared the moon with 19 degrees of Pisces sun and the 19-degree Gemini moon. So what you notice, or what I'm noticing right away, is that we've got Mercury here newly ingressed into Pisces. It's traditional fall and exile. It's not the favorite space for Mercury. And then we have that Mercury is hosting this moon. So there's usually, for me, there's a lot of confusion with a Pisces Mercury, where it's a little bit more, it's non-linear thinking, right?
Yeah, that's how I look at it. It's intuitive logic on one level, but it's non-linear.
Right. And it's one of this square, this decan of Gemini with this moon shows, it's a really visceral image. So we have, for the sun, we have this figure who looks very satisfied and content in the Nine of Cups, where the sun is. But in this Nine of Swords, we've got someone who's having sort of a nightmare, who's staying up at night worrying about all these different contradictions. And I think that this, to me, is something where our minds might get in the way of our manifestation. Like, we plant the seed with our vision, but then we think it to death in the early stages, right?
Right. And also, you may not want to trust everything coming into your mind.
Yes. I love that, because Mercury is in that place of maybe creating illusion also.
And lots of them with that Gemini energy, the moon in Gemini, that, not just in our perception of the world outside of us, but just even within our own self. And this is one of those moments that I would, counsel a client to say, write it down. Do not speak. Wait for this.
Double check, right?
Double check, right. Wait, and then look at your notes after, and you might be grateful you didn't.
Yeah.
sabotage yourself.
Well, and look here too. We're seeing the sun
Oh,
starting to apply to Neptune. So, things may not be what they appear to be, right?
so it's amplified
Right.
and it's only building. The sun is moving towards. And yeah, so this is a time of grain of salt, just little grains of salt in your water every single day during this cycle.
Indeed. Okay, so that's our first quarter moon on the 10th. We've got also during this period of time, Mars and Venus have separated from Pluto and Capricorn and have recently made their own conjunction in the beginning stages of Aquarius. So a little bit of a different vibe for Mars and Venus here. Maybe a little bit more, potentially more objective. I don't, what would
Yeah,
you say?
I wouldn't just, Venus is starting to be able to really resuscitate herself, recover, literally take breaths of
Mm,
air from being, in her condition. I mean, she's been a little traumatized, and kind of how I looked at, I have to say, this extremely unusual, Venus Mars conjunction going for such a long, expansive time that, you know, there is that Mars overtaking Venus concept, but also I look at it as she's, gone direct, that Mars is in his strength and almost like a warrior helping walk her to the gate, to that 0 degrees Aquarius, to just and get through Pluto. And then she starts moving forward. And that 3 degrees, just in my training, things don't form until that 3 degrees. And so she's just like getting the sleep out of her eyes and exactly having some awareness. And in the Aquarius part, what that says to me is even the they're bigger concepts. These are bigger constructs, bigger understandings. We're trying to understand the interconnectedness of everything and the bigger blueprint. And this is why we have danger with that, not danger, but we want to have awareness around Mercury and Pisces and Sun coming to Neptune and Moon in Gemini. That it's like, just wait, things are still in formation.
Well, and I'm looking, I stepped the chart back a little bit to March 6th here, where we saw the second conjunction of Mars and Venus at that 0 degree point. And I like that you brought that up because that's the exact point that Saturn and Jupiter came together, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, exactly. Our day and night. So now the day
Right.
or the night sect gets adjoining on the same degree. Isn't that fascinating?
Because we have this really almost the epoch changing conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter being in the air signs now, right? Really the elemental shift that we're experiencing. And now we have the more, you could call them more personal planets on some level, crossing over and conjoining in the similar area. So I'm thinking that the bigger shifts that were initiated around that period of time, there may be more action that's being taken on those themes as we get to this Mars-Venus conjunction here.
I love that. Like, we've been given the tools we need to have our boots on the ground and just like applying it, doing it, not just being even theoretical about it, but applying the knowledge that that North Node in Gemini just was so much thrown at us, and now applying it, not just talking about it.
Tanya is here. Tanya Gerardo is here asking, does Neptune have any chariot protection in Pisces? Tanya, I personally, I don't use the outer planets as sign rulers. In modern astrology, they would use Neptune as a co-ruler of Pisces with Jupiter, Uranus as a co-ruler of Aquarius with Saturn, and Pluto as a co-ruler with Mars of Scorpio. In traditional astrology, we just use the 7 visible planets. So I would say that chariot energy is probably more related to the 7 traditional planets than the outers. The way that I use the outer planets is more similar to the way that I use fixed stars. Sort of like I really focus on the conjunctions. I focus on them being kind of their own disruptive energy most of the time, and I do think that they are definitely transcendental in some way, where they speak a little bit more to collective needs. But to answer your question, I wouldn't necessarily think of Jupiter, Neptune having the Chariot protection there, and it wouldn't. I don't think it would really need it, so to speak, right? I mean, because it's such a vast outer collective planet that we're not going to necessarily see it being harmed by the sun, because it's outside of that orbit, completely, metaphorically. So I hope that answers that question. And thank you for everyone's suggestions for for staying regular in the chat.
That's great.
I did want to share this story, and I won't belabor this too much longer, but I thought it was important. As I was meditating on this physical issue, and I am somebody who believes that a lot of our physical issues are connected with some emotional challenges. I have a book called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Do you remember that book? It's a really great book. Classic, right? I was looking up.
Classic. Everyone needs it in their library.
I was looking up constipation after this experience, and I've been looking up various things. I was like, oh, did I have a kidney stone or like an appendix? Did my appendix burst or something? But nope, I'm fine. But constipation was talking about holding on to the past and refusing to release old energy. And I was just meditating on, I don't know, we've been talking about our kids, and I have a soon-to-be college-age daughter. I have an aging parent and all of those things. And I just wanted to reflect that maybe through that emotional holding on, it's like creating this blockage, and hopefully through this experience it'll help move on. And if any of you are experiencing those types of issues, think about what's going on in your life, because I do think that there is some reflection in how we're feeling in that moment that could be creating dis-ease within the body. Not to say that any of these things are necessarily our fault. That's not the angle I'm taking. It's just that seeing that there may be a connection with our emotions, what we're experiencing, and sometimes that can lead to a great sense of healing as well.
Well, I agree 1,000% with everything you're saying. And also another, something piece of wisdom that I brought from my Chinese medicine training was, they don't look at the mind, the emotions, and the physical body as separate. It's all one thing. So when they're treating you, they're not thinking, oh, well, this is a mental thing. It's all connected. And so, of course, if we have something within our mind, it's going to have a physical outcropping. So, there's no judgment. That's the thing. There's no judgment in it. It's all connected. And if we can, the mind, it's actually easier to move. It doesn't have density the same way. So hopefully the body will.
I like that. That's a great point, because, when things manifest into physical reality, there's a density to it, and your mind can be more flexible. And that's a great place to start that flexibility that could potentially lead to a breakthrough. And that is a really great reflection for where we're coming to with this full moon. Now, I will be breaking down the full moon in depth with another guest. Mercurius George, a good friend of mine, is going to be joining me on March the 16th. So make sure you mark your calendar and join me for that. But we get a full moon in the third decan of Virgo, opposite the third decan Pisces sun. And this energy is, the moon will be trine Pluto. This decan really speaks to coming to terms with impermanence, and like that sometimes bodies will decay, and the concept of entropy, and what are we going to pass on as our legacy to the next generation, and what are we willing to sacrifice, which brings in the themes of Pisces III, to bring and pass on something into the future. This actually brings a thought to mind, Shannon. One of the things that people have been talking about with Vladimir Putin is that he seems to be thinking that he wants to leave a legacy of reuniting the Soviet Union or something of that nature. And as misguided as that might be, that's sort of prominent in his thought process. It's just curious to me to see this full moon and thinking about where his mind might be at. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. And
and that's not condoning his behavior. In fact,
no,
I am very much against what is happening over there.
But I think it's important to understand where a person is coming from, misguided or not.
Yeah.
And build out. I think that's important, and that's fascinating. You bring that up through the lens of legacy.
Yeah.
But let's hope by this, because I'm looking at this, and it is so the moon, she's on her own.
Yeah.
She is on her own over there, reflecting everything on the other side.
And she's hosted by that funky Mercury too.
Exactly.
Right.
And that and thinking about that, what you were saying about the mind, going back to that, instead of letting Mercury, because if we're unconscious just walking through our day, we might not, like, we're subject to falsehoods, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And just letting information come in, where instead what we were talking about, the mind, being like, we can move our mind easier than we can move our bodies, that density aspect, that utilizing does it get any more like subdue Mercury and Pisces, like it's the bottom, where you can use that to try to erase certain ways that our mind may act. And then,
yeah, I think this is a great shut off the brain type of energy here. Exactly. Right? And not overthink things. There's a lot of anxiety that can come with a Virgo moon, a lot of worry.
All I think of is wringing hands.
Yeah. Well, pray for me at this full moon, because this one's exactly conjoining my Mars at 27 or 28 Virgo.
That's it. Like, you build towards it, and you give your notes, like, how about we do this? Right. Or undo, or I surrender to it. Exactly. You may have like the best. I would have a colonic that day. Really well.
I wrote in my notes detoxification for this full moon, so maybe this is.
And we're a place to go. It's like appease the aspect.
I've been. It's very humbling, this experience, because this has been bothering me for a couple weeks, and I'm like, oh my God, do I have a kidney infection, or like, I don't know, is it something super crazy? And my partner was really worried about me and was like, you need to go to the doctor. And I'm really not, I'm getting to the age where I need to really get over this, but I haven't been super thrilled about going to the doctor, because I've been sort of on the alternative herbal type of medicine kick. But I do think that we need like a checkup every once in a while, and Western medicine is good for like diagnosing problems and doing those types of things. But having it come back and being like, oh, it's confirmed now, Spencer, you really are full of shit. It's like the funniest thing ever to me. I've just been laughing about it. Because honestly, best outcome for that kind of pain, honestly. But it's just, it's funny that the Taurus moon in me is still like laughs at poop jokes and stuff. So I'm sorry if we're belaboring it today. It's sort of funny to me that that's going on. And So hopefully, yes, at this full moon,
Oh,
that there will be relief that will come.
I'm
Um,
so happy you went to the doctor, Spencer.
well, that's
It's
half the battle, right? Knowing what's wrong with you is half the battle, right?
that's it.
Clarity.
That's it for me too. Once I
Yeah.
know, as soon as I name it, I can erase it or
Yes.
heal it,
Totally.
whatever
Totally.
whatever that is. And I'll just say from my healing journeys, it's been a perfect balance of both, like Western medicine and
Yep.
alternative medicine. If I didn't have either one, not exaggerating, I would not be on this planet anymore.
Yep. I
One
agree.
got me so far, and the other one took me the rest of the way, and a few times. So it's, yeah, balance, right? That's another thing of the
100%. And as I'm getting older, I'm having to release some of my stubbornness about feeling like I can do it all myself. Does that make sense? There's a humility that comes in with saying, "Oh, I'm not invincible. I do need some help every once in a while." And that's some of the wisdom of aging, I think, as well.
aging, and then the what we share having a Leo ascendant
Yeah.
and trying to, yeah, I can will myself through anything.
Willing it. Yes, exactly.
And then
Yes.
being humbled, like it just, humility is important to me. It's like
100%.
for me anyways, it's always the answer. If I'm upset about something, you got to go into humility, and then it's
That's right.
like, oh,
All
okay.
right, Shannon. We're rounding the bend here and coming to home. Rachel is saying the body is such a wonderful teacher and not one we could ignore. Yes, thinking of it, of finding it hard to let go of something. And also it says that I do think we have to work with the physical and the emotional body. Working with one usually will affect the other. I agree. I
Oh,
agree 100%. Um,
beautiful.
Tarya is complimenting the guests we have on this show. Thank you, Tarya. Uh, I agree. I thank you so much, Shannon, for being here, my guest today. I always love having conversations with people. I love talking things out and just getting to see other people's light shine as well as my own here. You know, it's so much fun to me.
You're so good at that. You
I
really
try. Sharing is important. I think this is something that I think that if I'm meditating on just the current social media environment, we feel like we have to be the loudest, most bombastic, talking all the time type of person to just get any attention. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that when we share our light, but also leave space for others to share theirs, I mean, that's when we're really, cooking with gas on some level.
exactly.
I think that's my approach to all of this, and um, it's really important for us to leave space for um, other viewpoints, other opinions, other perspectives. It's just really important. I think that's the reason that I do this and have guests on the show is so that I don't get in my own echo chamber and I have people that can push back and that can share their own viewpoint, and help me to not get crystallized, internally, physically or mentally or emotionally. And I think that's important. And yeah, Colette's saying energy exchange. It's a nice thing, and I hope that we can get back to having conversations like that more often and hold space for that for one another.
Well, that's a little of what I look at Venus, because the North Node moved into Taurus, and then she was still in the dungeon, and not equipped to help us find that peace, which I think, not peace, yes, but just being able to have conversations and learn from each other, that coming in. Well, synergy, not
Yeah.
to jump ahead, but that it's that we can work together. And that's what I think too. She's like, okay, let me take a look now as she moves into Aquarius. And she still has to get through a square with Uranus. She still has to
Right.
get past Saturn. But
Right.
then once she gets into Pisces, that's another moment where maybe what we're looking at if we set intentions around.
I'm looking forward to that time.
I'm looking forward to that time too.
There's going to be a really interesting, not looking too far ahead, but there's going to be a Venus-Jupiter conjunction, that I'm like, oh, that looks super, super nice.
Mark that in your calendars electionally.
Yeah. But yes, this time period at this full moon, we are having the squares between Venus and Mars and Uranus that are going to be happening, one right after another. And that may shake things up a little bit. So there may be some shakeups at this full moon. There may be some things that shake us out of our routines and out of our, maybe fixed positions. And sometimes that can be really healing. So try to navigate it with grace.
Yep. Stress creates growth.
100%. Okay. So I'm going to stop my share here on the screen, and let's talk a little bit about the I-Ching and our animal kind of symbol that can help us give us some guidance through these times here. So the animal that I got, Shannon, was the dog. That was really interesting and nice.
I love the dog.
So a lot of the things we've been talking about here, some of the notes I wrote down: loyalty, protection, service, remaining faithful to your vision and your loved ones, unconditional love, which is something that comes up with Pisces a lot, right? Unconditional love. Trusting your sense of smell, which is related to the intuition. And then appreciating your companions with gratitude. Like a dog is a pack animal, and they very much need companionship. So through these tough times, I think having gratitude for the people in your life is super important, and not taking those things for granted, right?
Letting little things go.
Yeah. Letting little things go. Do you have a dog, Shannon?
We have cats.
You have cats. I'm a cat.
I'm a cat and dog person. Yeah. I just, honestly, I haven't had a dog because of all my personal practice that I didn't, I didn't want a barker. But I grew up, I had an Alaskan Malamute that was half wolf that lived to be 18, which is a very long. It's
pretty long for a big dog like that.
And I still, that loyalty that he had with us and protection, I still could cry, It's that dog energy, unreal.
Yeah, I sometimes go down YouTube rabbit holes with animal videos. I love animals. And the ones that get me are the ones where there's this rescued dog that was like abused or like in a traumatic situation, that through like the love of a new owner, you can see them transform into this happy, beautiful spirit that's trusting again. And to me, that's always so hopeful, because these dogs have experienced the worst of abuse in these situations, but they still, like, through trust and faith, have been able to come out of that trauma and learn to love. And it was always there. It just needed to be cultivated once again. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what I love about dogs.
That is the most beautiful symbol for this cycle.
Totally.
Because we have all the trauma happening, and still having that. There's always a light, in there somewhere. And the loyalty part. Loyalty, not for darkness, but it's just about unconditional love. That's how I look at the loyalty. Yeah. It's through, no matter what, that love is always there.
It's important to remember in these times,
Yes.
So we have an I-Ching that we did for this as well. I got the hexagram number 30, which roughly translates to radiance, synergy, clarity, fire, like shedding light or enlightenment, and interdependence, which is what we've been talking about here. And it's moving to the hexagram innocence, which I've explained on this channel a few times. The innocence in the traditional Chinese way is not necessarily like the innocence of youth. It's more about releasing expectations, not thinking about having to do things a certain way. It's about acting naturally and spontaneously, and like embracing kind of the unexpected type of thing as well. right?
Well, like be humble to it.
Right. Surrender to it. I like that. Two changing lines. The first changing line, number 3, says, in the light of the setting sun, they either beat the pot and sing or loudly bewail the approach of old age, misfortune. So we've got the setting sun here. So something that we've been attached to is ending in this new moon. We see this, maybe this is the end of inequality. Maybe this is the end of like a situation where we have, if I'm thinking about this globally, on some level, maybe this is the beginning of a healing process, I hope. I don't know. It's like I said, it's hard to talk about, but maybe in our personal lives as well. There's
Even
probably some
to having your head in the ground for some people.
Right. Yeah. The end of ignoring our interconnectedness, right? I like that. And I think that being able to adapt to the new reality is important. Aligning with the transition to find clarity. And then there's another line that says, tears fall like heavy rain, sighing and lamentation, good fortune. So a lot of the times the I-Ching will have these almost contradictory methods or messages, but I like to read them from the bottom up. So this line 3 was first, where maybe we are mourning the loss of something. But if we go through this process, this cleansing process where we mourn the loss of something and then let that pain and that grief to begin the healing process, it's cathartic, right? There's a catharsis that we're healing with that.
That's so beautiful. And I think that is a part people want to skip over.
Yes.
And it
100%.
isn't healed.
Yes. Yeah, you can't wish away the tears, right? You got to go through that process and accept that there are some things that need to change. But I think eventually the I-Ching seems to be suggesting that through going through the mourning process, through releasing the past, the change might be for the better. This was something that specifically this translation that I like, Jack M. Balkin, The Laws of Change, was speaking towards. So I think that Pisces being a water sign, it requires you to go with the current, the flow. You will just exhaust yourself if you try to go against the flow of the divine, the Tao, right? The natural forces.
Nature is stronger.
Nature is always stronger.
Nature always wins.
We're going to learn that.
It's not competition. It just is.
And we're going to learn that the hard way, or we are learning that the hard way right now. This was something the Changing of the Gods was talking about too, was the rights of nature and like building it in like a nature's bill of rights in these smaller communities that we're seeing across the country, where they're saying, hey, this is an important organism, that deserves protection.
Like
right?
Literally.
Right.
That's incredible. Someone has to do it,
So yeah, I hope that we are able to come back into alignment with the protecting natural forces, and Colette's saying that we might be mourning the loss of millions of lives worldwide from the coronavirus as well. I think so. I think that it's easy to kind of forget that in the last 2 or 3 years here, we've gone through a huge traumatic loss and a sense of change, and just like trying to just go back to normal without mourning that experience that's a recipe for carrying that trauma with us, and having it turn into something darker,
and not learning from it, just trying to skip over it and wait for it to be done. It's like that's what I mean by the maturation process of humanity. We're at that point where we can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I think otherwise the next thing that comes back will be more stringent and pointed.
This Indra's net thing really affected me when the West Coast recently was having forest fires, because recently I was seeing, this was maybe a year ago, last summer, when there was the huge fires in California and in Oregon. the smoke from those fires was making the sun deep burnt orange in Michigan. Do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, so literally I could smell the fire in Michigan from the West Coast. Like I was like, it smells like it's burning. And so it was in the air. So
What?
that was a moment to me.
Yeah, that's an epiphany moment.
Yeah.
That's revelatory.
So I think that learning about these interconnections and is important at this period of time, and surrendering to them and just embracing it and realizing that it's not necessarily a bad thing that we're connected, that it can be a good thing. You know,
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
There's more benefit than not.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, I think we did it, Shannon. I think we got through the new moon, the full moon, and all of the different things that we have here. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful. It's a great talk.
For sharing me with your group. Thank
you everyone out there who's been participating in the chat. This is a really great chat that we have here. Thank you so much for all of your comments and contributions. Please do me a favor, if you've been enjoying this, please hit that like button. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. Remember, there's a Decans of Pisces webinar coming up on March the 12th, and there's a discount code that you can use, Pisces 20, until March the 1st. Support Shannon at moongathering.com. She's available for readings. She has a class coming up in the spring. Do you have an email list as well, Shannon?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Sign up for the newsletter when you're prompted to. I think it comes up.
Sign up for the newsletter so you can know when her class is coming. Sign up for my newsletter so you know my classes are coming. And we both do readings. So if you need help in these challenging times, there are lots of folks out there like us that are more than happy to help you through some of these transitions, and hopefully give you some of the archetypal stories that can bring you a sense of peace and balance. All right. Looking in the chat here, I've heard of this proposed enshrining of the rights of nature in law, and we are sometimes guilty of ignoring our own rights and live in harmony with our vulnerable nature too. Yeah, I mean, I think that when you treat nature like with fairness and equality, it's much easier to treat human beings the same way. So yeah, Rachel, I think it's something that definitely to consider. And hopefully we will treat the planet with respect, as well as one another's sovereignty and humanity. All right, we did it. We got through it. Thank you, friends. Thanks again for being here. Thank you, Shannon, so much. It's so wonderful talking with you. And be sure to join me next week. It's not on the schedule yet, but I'm going to be doing a Jupiter Cazimi Q&A on Friday, whatever the date is next Friday. What is the date next Friday? The 4th of March. I will be here doing a Q&A on the Jupiter Cazimi. So come celebrate Jupiter Cazimi with me, or bring your questions, bring your astrology questions, and we will try to unpack all of that for you. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you today. Remember, be kind to one another and be kind to yourself, and try to find that balance and that equilibrium and that peace, and then you can bring it out into the world. So take care, everyone. We'll see you the next time. Peace.